Greetings, everybody. Thank you for joining today's I Am Online. This is the monthly webinar series focused on identity and access management, brought to you by InCommon and Internet 2. My name is April Motley, and I am the communications lead for InCommon, and I'm happy to help host this hour of community and collaboration. Our moderator is pretty awesome, so without further ado, I'm going to pass the virtual podium to Mike Sawacki.
Thanks, April. I'm pretty all right, at least. My name is Mike Zawacki. I'm a program manager with Internet 2, and I'm just going to go ahead and get right into it. We have a pretty packed agenda for today, so I just want to make sure that we get through everything. Everybody's seeing the slides there. Okay, great. Well, here we go. Again, Mike Zawacki, program manager for Internet 2. I'm joined by Rami Bolton, also with Internet 2, who is a project manager. And then we're also joined by some terrific folks from our community, from the eduroam advisory committee and from our support organizations, Ben Nelson and Brett Bieber, both from Connected Nebraska, and Amanda Molinari and Jeff Egley from Utah Education Telehealth Network, or UETN. 2022 has been a pretty big year for eduroam. Really what we're going to do today is look at where we are, what the community has been up to, some new developments with eduroam in the K-12 space, things that we have done this year, and look a little bit about where we're going. And again, then, as April mentioned, we'll be doing Q&A at the end. So please add your questions to the chat, to the Q&A function, or just hold them, and we'll get to as many of you as humanly possible. So where we are, general service update. At present, we have a little over 1,000 subscribers, 1049 to be exact. We have 2,895 service locations. That means places where you can go to eduroam. That's not an AP count, just a location, a facility count. And we'll talk a little bit more about that number in a few minutes here. We are currently have K-12 deployments in 5 states. Again, more info on that to follow. And we're closing in on year one of our new infrastructure. And this is both how eduroam is run from sort of a bits and bytes and plumbing sort of perspective, as well as from a new administrative interface. Speaking of that, here is our new home, the Eduroam Federation Manager. A lot of you are probably already pretty familiar with this. I sure hope so. It's the same sort of tried and tested portal that InCommon, that the InCommon Federation uses. So if you use InCommon or are familiar with InCommon, the interface should seem pretty familiar to you. Federated logon will hopefully then decrease some of the difficulty of getting into the interface, make it easier, more seamless, and allow for better kind of access control. We are focusing on sort of flexibility and infrastructure that is easy to expand and extend. We really want to, you're going to hear that a lot, sort of hooks for future functionality. It's sort of been a big driver and a big goal for us. So there have been lots of new additions this year, and there are definitely more to come. Make sure your administrators are using the interface. And again, more on that later. I've also included a link to the eduroam Federation Manager user guide in the eduroam knowledge database there at the bottom. So those service locations, I'm going to introduce a term, a friendly or an international friendly, or as it's sometimes called, an exhibition game or a scrimmage. And what does this mean with regard to eduroam? Well, right now there are 3 countries that are leading the world in eduroam service locations. Brazil, as you can see there, is up at the top. Germany, kind of in the middle, number 2, and US is just behind Germany. So we think that we could probably move that number up. So in order to do this, we have coined, or actually our EAC chair, Jeff Egley, I believe, coined this term, Hotspot-toberfest. What we want to do is try and move up our number of service locations. And there are a few different ways we could do this. Obviously, deploy new service locations is one, but you can also go into the eduroam Federation Manager and register your service locations, your existing service locations. In many cases, folks will, register their main campus or their main facility, and then they'll bring eduroam up at a completely different campus or another facility, and then they just, they don't note it in the mapping interface. And that, it's really, the work takes a few minutes. Again, the eduroam Federation Manager User Guide has some pretty detailed steps. And really, it's great when you do this because it does help your fellow eduroam administrators and the fellow eduroamers. The community can kind of get a better sense for where they can roam, where the service is available. And it also helps your colleagues who might be having some internal discussions around adopting eduroam or expanding their eduroam, because if they can bring up that eduroam map that is maintained on incommon.org, they can point out to these, internal and external stakeholders, look at all the places where you can use this. And so it really, increases the visibility of the value for the service and for the community as well. And it's a matter of national pride. I mean, come on, folks, I'm sure we can do better than number 3. All right, I will pause here and turn things over to Jeff Egley, from UATN, who is the chair of the eduroam advisory committee, and Brett Bieber from Connected Nebraska, who is the vice chair of the eduroam advisory committee. And they're going to talk a little bit about the EAC and what they've been doing this last year.
Hey, thanks, Mike. And yeah, if you want to just jump to the next slide. Privilege getting to share today what we've been doing with the EAC. And one thing I wanted to just bring everybody up to speed on, EAC, if you're not familiar, is pretty new, group in terms of the committees within Internet 2 and working with trust and identity. And a point I want to make up is actually we have a number of seats that will be coming available this year. So if you have an interest in participating, we would encourage your participation. And so we'll see some major change this year. It's a great group. We're doing good work. Number of us also come out of the support organization side of things, and as Brett will allude to as we move on, there's a lot of work going on, and we'll talk some about one of those efforts right now on onboarding. But I'll make just another pitch that Mike did on the service provider too, and just on the mapping, getting that mapping up, I think, and having all those sites out there really helps too as we go to work and bring on additional service providers. Some of those that might be, say, in the private sector may not be familiar really the coverage and the adoption here, and so it really helps in that case as well. Mike, if you want to jump to the next slide. So some of the first work we started out here, Rob Gorell and Kim Owen both had were both chairs at one point with the EAC, and one of the first things we dove into was the eduroam best practices guide, and I and Rob and others contributed to crafting that, outlining that, and seeing that through the process, and now part of some of the work that we're doing as part of the EAC. Some important work right now, which Brett will speak to, is the onboarding and the guest access, and just really appreciate him being able to join us today and share and provide a look into what's going on there. And also want to encourage too that the EAC is listening. We want feedback on other areas that we may need to dive into and focus on. And so your feedback is welcome and encouraged. And so with that, Brett, we'll jump to the next slide. And I think this jumps right into the onboarding.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. And I was just going to also say that that's a fantastic group that's on the EAC, but we are, absolutely interested. Please nominate yourself or a colleague if they're interested in advancing eduroam and working with us on this. But one of the work products that we wanted to at least mention to you all is something that we call the user device onboarding requirements. And this kind of came out of what Jeff mentioned earlier, which was a best practices guide, which was a simple guide that was published by the EAC that talked about some of the important considerations when you're interested in deploying eduroam, things that you should consider. And if you saw the webinar, the most recent webinar, which I think was with Mike and with Sarah, they spoke about how do we enable the next 1,000 subscribers. So as Mike mentioned, we're just now over 1,000 subscribers. How do we enable the next 1,000 subscribers, and where will they come from? And what do we need to do as a community to make it easier to onboard new users, and also easier to onboard new organizations that are interested in joining this federated wireless infrastructure. So as I mentioned, we started with a best practices guide. We then continued to evolve that document and work with our advisors within the EAC, some very well-known names within that group that are very interested in and very familiar with eduroam and how to authenticate users. And we evolved that document into this user device onboarding requirements doc that is aimed at providing some improved and some ways to accelerate the adoption of eduroam for folks that either don't have the Radius infrastructure, don't have the expertise on how to host that, or are interested in doing things such as providing a secondary credential to that device so that the user doesn't have to provide their primary credential, their standard username and password, into that device for their access to eduroam. So in combination with that best practices guide and then continuing to develop this user onboarding and requirements document, we're hoping to accelerate that and come up with some really innovative ways that we can advance and get the next 1,000 subscribers. I'll just mention at a high level some very interesting concepts that folks are talking about, such as containerized Radius deployments, such as hosted, potentially even hosted Radius infrastructure, tools like Get Eduroam and tools like CAT. How can all of those work together, including the in-common federation, so that web-based logins and eduroam logins for wireless access can all be simplified for a new adopter that is trying to get onto this and understand this federated identity world that we live in. So I'm excited to continue advancing that and working with folks on that. I think the next slide, actually, Mike, talks a little bit about where this one kind of is prioritized with some other things. So for example, the user device onboarding, we have a lot more interest in that than the guest access, which is another service that is on the list of things that we want to work on for eduroam. So in terms of prioritizations, Sarah and Mike and Rami and the group, they're all helping kind of prioritize and understand where can we actually fit in the work that needs to get done that's kind of recommended by the EAC, and what's the timeline for that. And so right now, I think we're targeting 2023 and to really begin some more discussion around the user device onboarding and accelerate the work and the recommendations that were put forth there. But if any of that sounds interesting to you all, I would recommend that you nominate yourself or volunteer to participate in the EAC, because it is it's a fantastic group to work with. Just one more piece on the guest access. If you want to go to the next slide, Mike. A requirements document was created for what guest access would look like, and that recommendation went to Internet 2 and In-Common, and I think we put it out for comment at the end of last year to receive suggestions or any additional feedback on that. And right now, as I mentioned before, the user device onboarding has kind of moved up, and the guest access is something that will be coming in the future, but that will allow, for example, a service provider who's providing eduroam within their location, the ability to create a guest credential that will allow that user, a guest user, to access eduroam at that particular service location. So more to come on that. And as I said before, please volunteer if you're interested in helping us in the EAC. There's a nomination form, and I'm sure we can get that out inside the chat to you all. Please nominate yourself or someone else that's interested in this to help advance eduroam across the United States. And we will win that friendly, Mike. I know we will.
I agree. I have every confidence in us. Thanks, Jeff and Brett. Really appreciate your perspective and also your leadership on the committee. All right. So support organization updates. It's probable that most of you might be familiar with this concept, but just in case, I'm going to provide a real quick high-level overview of the support organization program. The idea here is that a regional network or kind of other state or otherwise organization that serves K-12s in a state or part of the country can sign a single agreement and pay a single fee to cover all of the K-12's libraries and museums in their state, and then also do unlimited kind of hotspot turnups as well. They take on some portions of the service delivery to help with the scaling of these sort of really substantial rollouts, and they also manage any contracting or invoicing of its own constituents. So currently there are 3 support organizations that are up and running. Those are Connected Nebraska, Sun Corridor Network serving Arizona, and UETN. We have 2 on-rampers, and I'll talk a little bit about what that means. Currently CEN and Link Oregon. So some quick facts on this. We've got 270 school districts, over 270 actually, private schools and academies, and numerous hotspots across 3 states. We've also entered into, or our support organizations have entered into partnerships with local internet service providers to expand the eduroam service via community hotspots. And really, the support organization community is where the growth in the service has been happening. And with that, I will turn things over to Ben Nelson of Connected Nebraska.
Thank you, Mike. Again, Ben Nelson, I'm a project manager for the Connected Nebraska, which is our program that we got established for the eduroam. The Connected Nebraska program is really a collaboration of some very powerful and passionate community groups, including our universities, specifically University of Nebraska, our Network Nebraska department, our Department of Education, and our educational service units and their districts. So a very large collection of groups coming together to make this happen. Network Nebraska, who works with our school districts for internet service, saw the importance of eduroam and has now added this to their list of provided services for all K-12. So it's just provided for, it's sustained at this point. As you can see, currently we are, and those numbers have continued to grow, we are 148 as of this morning, districts signed up, and those are public school districts. We do have 1 private school signed up as well. And it's been a year and 9 months since we started. That first 6 months was our pre-kickoff, and we had 4 brave districts that signed up for that. After that, so 6 months of last year, we had 46 districts sign up. And then this year, in the 9 months since the beginning of this year, we have had 98 districts. So we're actually at 62% of our districts. And you see those ESUs, our educational service units, those support all those districts, public school districts. We got 86% of them all signed up. We have 6 businesses signed up. That includes an ISP and a couple conference centers as well. Next slide. One thing that really jumped up our numbers this year was some funding. As you can see, we had some gear funding come in. Our governor was great to provide $104 million to distribute for equipment, software, labor as needed to help support this. We opened it up for any kind of equipment. Sorry, it was telling me I was muted. I am not though. And we are continue to process those requests. As you can see at the bottom, we had 130 requests. The funding started on June 1st of this year and ended September 15th. So it's a very short time period, but we had some great results. Around 866K will be provided to all those districts to get them signed up. Basically give them the equipment they need to do eduroam. Next slide. As Connected Nebraska continues, we've been really working with the school districts heavily last 3 months, last year actually, to get them online. School started, so we're going to slow down a little bit with them. We'll of course continue working with them, but we're also going to start reaching out to our local businesses that work with our schools and see if we can get them enabled. We're going to also work with more ISPs, bus companies, parks, places that we know students will go. We're going to re-engage with our libraries, our museums, and we're going to just try to really find what other partners that we can find to help our Connected Nebraska services. And that is my update.
All right. Thank you, Ben. Amanda, would you like to lead us through what's been going on in Utah?
Yes, thank you. My name is Amanda Molinari. I'm an IT project manager with Utah Education and Telehealth Network. To the right, you'll see a map of basically our current infrastructure and where we're located there. Right now, we have nearly all districts in Utah with eduroam. We are engaged in a promotional campaign to increase awareness of the service and also to drive the adoption among K-12 students and teachers. The promotional campaign includes things like, sending informational things through email and through our user group that we have once a month, and just different materials, social media, stuff like that. We worked with the Utah state government, UETM. We brought over 50 new SP only locations online, including numerous state parks, DMV offices, and other state government facilities. And then we're also increasing the number of SP only constituents. So there you see an image. We have eduroam on the UTA Frontrunner, and we also have it at the Salt Lake City Library. Okay. eduroam in K-12. Basically, we're working to expand available hotspots within the areas outside of the districts. So basically, if a district leader or somebody within that community brings a site to my attention and says, hey, we could possibly use eduroam here, and it's a great community location, then I might reach out to them. We might set up meetings, and we'll try to get them set up with eduroam. So basically, the promotional drive to expand hotspots outside of the existing eduroam community. So that would include state government buildings, state parks, DMV rest stops, and then businesses. So right now we are kind of focused on those businesses. We are working with a local provider to reach out to them as well. So, okay, next slide. eduroam to go is a little side project that spurred off of our user group meeting. And basically what it is using AP devices that are maybe deprecated or end of life, and removing the firmware, replacing that with some open source software, and then from an end to end create a solution that's basically out of the box usables, to where if we have a site that says, hey, I would like to have eduroam here, we could give them this device that's pre-configured, and they would be up and working. This is a largely volunteer operation. So it really relies on the community to not only find the AP devices, which will happen, as districts move away from certain Wi-Fi devices, they become deprecated, and those are devices that we could always scoop up and use. So they would be in charge of wiping those and getting those updated with the proper firmware. And they would also be responsible for saying, hey, which site do we want to have set up? So again, that's repurposing the hardware, which I think is really great. It's a nice environmental kind of thing right there. So yeah, pre-configured. Yeah, and it would lower barriers for businesses that would want to join. Okay, and we're getting so close. We have 3 phase gates in this sort of project, and we're getting very close to closing that first phase gate. So I'm really excited about that. Okay, next slide. And that's it.
Thanks, Amanda. All right, so I'm going to stand in for some of our friends at Sun Corridor Network. They've been doing some really terrific work as well, and I want to make sure that their accomplishments get highlighted. So what they've done thus far, I guess I should say Sun Corridor Network is an organization that serves the K-12 libraries and other organizations with our educational organizations within the state of Arizona. It is a partnership between Arizona State University and other state educational government entities. So what they've done is thus far is they went ahead and created a website for eduroam for the Sun Corridor community so that they could do promotions, drive traffic to that site, and sort of use it as a front door for their work in the state of Arizona. They have deployed their first pilot districts to school districts, Pinal and Florence, and have created a legal agreement structure for their members and carried that through sort of the university procurement process. And now that they kind of have that formalized, they expect that they'll pick up more schools as Pinal and Florence just sort of agreed to sort of run on the bleeding edge with without a formal agreement in place. And so that having that done is going to ease that sort of the next steps for the coming schools here. And so that's kind of where a lot of their attention is. And they're also pursuing a partnership with a state library system. Having eduroam up in those locations would open up a little over 200 locations around Arizona. And again, the more places you can use eduroam, the easier it is to convince folks to join eduroam. So that would be a pretty cool little coup for them. Then also working with eduroam institutions within Arizona to update their location info. Laura Eder and Dennis Kinton from Sun Corridor Network have been really kind of sounding the drum beats to get service locations signed up. So we definitely appreciate them there. And again, just sort of showing people where they can roam and making the service easier to use and more attractive for folks to start using. All right, I mentioned on-ramps and two organizations in particular who have joined as on-rampers, as we call them now. The on-ramp is basically provides a set period of time for sort of a limited trial of the support organization program for interested organizations. And during this time, we waive the fees that are normally associated with the program while folks are on-ramping. And this just sort of, again, makes it easier for them to get up and running, and again, to make those use cases to folks in their state. So an on-ramp is a support organization, essentially. They can sign up up to 5 K-12 districts or other, the libraries or museums as well. And when the next cohort begins, then those on-rampers can then join the support organization as full participants, or they can also say, well, this may not have worked out like we thought, and they can, if they need to spin down those 5 initial identity providers, they can do that at that time. So right now, individual K-12s who want to use eduroam need to kind of do so through a support organization. We love K-12s. We would love to have all of them, but really it is kind of a matter of scaling. We want to be able to continue to offer eduroam at a sort of a quality of service level that the community has come to expect. And to do that, we need our scaling partners. And so that is why we sort of have the flow of K-12 running through support organizations. So, as I said, Link Oregon, CEN, Connecticut Education Network, were selected as the 2022 eduroam support organization cohort on-rampers. And so they have been spending this year kind of building out their support network, formalizing processes, and building the relationships within their state to really position them for success in 2023 should they decide to join as full support organizations. And it's worth noting that both Link Oregon and CEN are existing Internet 2 regional network connectors. They understand the community. They really kind of so they can engage with the community pretty easily, pretty seamlessly. So we're really glad to have them on board, trying out this new structure, this new aspect of the support organization program. Okay. And that brings us to what we've done this year. We've heard a lot of cool stuff from the support organizations. I'll take a few minutes here to just talk a little bit about what's been going on with the service over 2022. So we mentioned, that the eduroam Federation Manager is the new home for eduroam. One of the things we've been doing is looking at ways to enable testing of the service through the eduroam Federation Manager. And the first one that we added was IDP testing. The IDP test runs right out of the EFM, usually takes about 10 to 15 seconds per realm, and provides your eduroam administrators with results of the authentication, any error messages, and just also let you know which of the top level radius servers were used to proxy the test. Right now, you can test via a variety of authentication methods, EPEEP, EPTTLS, and EPTLS. And those realms obviously have to be fully approved. The IDP has to be fully configured in the eduroam Federation Manager. It's essentially a test in the production environment, or test of that account in the production environment. And hooks for future functionality. Again, you're going to hear that a lot as we talk through the things that are new in eduroam. We really want to make these new functionalities scalable, extensible. We want to be able to do cool new stuff with them. So eventually it might not be just an IDP realm test. You might see things like, sort of active monitoring. You can set up active monitoring on realms and periodic tests, or if they see anything amiss, they might come back and tell your eduroam administrators, pop up alerts and so forth. And again, we're sort of building out the base functionality first. And then once we have that, we're going to circle back, taking in feedback from the community to know what's important, and continue to build this out and make the eduroam Federation Manager and the service itself better, faster, and stronger. I mentioned down here that there's a testing guide that's available in the eduroam knowledge base. There's that link again. Another thing that we've added is the ability to view the logs, again, from the sort of from the top level radius server perspective. Again, you get that through the link in the eduroam Federation Manager. The tool is powered by Grafana, which is an incredibly powerful and flexible platform for log monitoring. Grafana is an open source tool, flexible, highly customizable, and has a great user community that we can draw on to help build out new functionality. It's worth noting too that if you're an administrator for multiple organizations, it's going to work out of a single instance. You don't need to keep logging in and out of the interface to see all of the realms you're responsible for. And there's that hooks for future functionality again. And we have a log viewer guide available in the eduroam knowledge base. So it isn't just technical stuff. We've been focusing on things like accessibility and making sure that the eduroam Federation Manager, and by extension, the service itself, is accessible to folks who might have differences in their sight, in how they hear, and how they can interact with their with a computer. So we went through the VPAT, which is the Voluntary Product Accessibility Template. Really, the VPAT just sort of lays out the standards, the 508 standards for IT accessibility, which is a set of federal standards, and in a very kind of easy to compare way, lays out how the service meets and supports those various criteria. And you can kind of see that here, right? You've got which criteria is applicable. Does the service support it, and to what degree? And can you tell us a little bit more about how how your service supports that level of accessibility, or that level of that criteria? And this is really good for it provides like an explanation of the compliance level. It is really, again, easily digestible, easy to compare. And we found that this is really useful for procurement discussions when folks are talking internally about whether or not they're going to use the service. And this is something that we heard a request and a need for at the community level. And so we made sure to bake that into our list of to-dos over this year. And you can find the VPAT at the knowledge base. There's the link again. You're going to see that link a lot. Another thing that we've focused on here is the HECVAT, or the Higher Education Community Vendor Assessment Toolkit. This is something along the similar lines to the VPAT, although it's not a federal standard. It's really just sort of a questionnaire framework, and it is intended to assess the information security and data protection features and policies of the service and of the organization that offers the service. And so again, it's that kind of consistent methodology for evaluating services. It makes it much easier to sort of do apples to apples comparison, and it helps with procurement procurement discussions. Again, if you can kind of easily demonstrate what the service does and how it does it, that can make those sorts of discussions with internal stakeholders a lot easier. And that the HECVAT is available upon request. You can just contact help@incommon.org. Tell us you'd like to see the HECVAT, and we'll send it over to you and your team. All right, closing in on done here. We're going to talk a little bit about, we've talked about our accomplishments, and now we want to kind of take a moment to look at where we're going and what's next for the service and the community. I mentioned IDP testing. Obviously, there's another portion of the service. You want to make sure that users who are roaming at your facility can use the service. And so next on the docket of things to deploy is SP testing. And it's going to be added to the eduroam Federation Manager, exactly like IDP testing. It'll basically sort of use the same process or same framework to present the tests tool to your administrators. And it's going to be similar in IDP testing, but it's really worth noting, as I'm sure is probably not much of a surprise to any of you who spent time with the service, that it's completely different under the hood. It's a little more complex because it requires that temporary test accounts be created and then deprovisioned sanely, safely, and securely. And that's sort of why we went with the IDP testing first. It was sort of frankly, it was also a little bit more requested by the community, but also it was sort of an easier technical lift, and we really wanted to put tools in the community's hands as soon as possible. Right now, we're expecting the SP test to be available at the end of or sometime in Q4 of this year or first quarter of next. And you should look for an email update or that will be posted to the eduroam admins list. And you're on eduroam admins, right? Because if you're not, there's a link down there. It's pretty good resource for information on the service in the community. Speaking of which, support your local eduroam administrator by making sure that you have one. What we found is sort of the set and forget nature of eduroam can be a little bit of a double-edged sword, right? Last year, we transitioned from the legacy infrastructure over to our new cloud-forward infrastructure. The eduroam Federation Manager became the method by which folks could manage their service. And it went apparently well enough that some eduroam institutions haven't even needed to log in to the eduroam Federation Manager since being moved over. And we really want to make sure that every subscriber has at least one administrator, ideally more than one, and have been reaching out to those who haven't logged in. So if you have not logged in since last year, check your inbox and reach out to us at help@incommon.org if you want a hand getting your account set up, because obviously, when things break is not the time you want to try to be provisioning your account and setting up credentials. Some general high-level stuff that it's going to be going on as well. We have a major maintenance planned sometime in mid to late October. This work will involve network elements that service TLRS-1, one of the two top-level radio servers. Right now, we've developed a plan to minimize or avoid service disruptions, and we're going to be testing that in the weeks ahead of the maintenance. Again, if you're an eduroam administrator, you can expect regular communications from Internet 2, and you can go to the eduroam admin list to see updates as well. And then we're also working on service hardening. We really want to make sure that our monitoring gets better, the durability of our infrastructure continues to improve. DevOps is life. When we made the move over to this cloud forward architecture, one of the goals was to enable a more DevOps approach to running and improving the service. So the flexibility of our infrastructure can mean a little bit more design work at the front end of the process. There's a lot more in the way of moving parts. But that also means there are a lot more opportunities to improve the service. We can build better, faster, and stronger. So we're looking at better monitoring, better routing, and better container management of the service. And really, a lot of this work is invisible to the community. But if you want, you can go over to that eduroam knowledge base or the wiki. You can take a look at the various improvements that the team has been making to the eduroam Federation Manager and to the infrastructure itself. And we are always looking for ways to make things better. So if you have an idea or some feedback, if there's something you'd like us to see or to do more of, less of, or differently, just reach out to help@incommon.org. And that's it. I guess at this point, we'll go ahead and April, we want to open it up for questions. And I also want to thank our panelists, Amanda, Jeff, Ben, Brett, and the whole community that they're standing in front of for helping out with this presentation.
Absolutely, Mike. Thank you so much to you and our other presenters this afternoon. I'm not seeing anything listed in the Q&A. I also was looking in chat. If you do have a question, now is your opportunity to ask it. You can post it in chat or unmute yourself or raise your hand, excuse me, and we'll be happy to address your question live. Or our expert speakers answered all the questions.
Oh, I will say too that we have members from the eduroam infrastructure team here as well. So if you have questions around sort of the technical aspects, now is a great time. We've got everybody in the room.
Mike, I have a quick question actually, and because I've recently been involved in this process. For anybody that is on this afternoon that is not utilizing the new interface, I wonder if you could just say a little bit about how they can get connected, and perhaps an example of a scenario where it was really helpful to someone that they were using the Federation Manager as opposed to not having their admin be connected with us in that way.
Sure. I mean, as far as like immediate, I don't want to name names or anything, but we have had a number of instances where an institution, something changed locally, right? Something changed in the radius infrastructure or something changed in their network, and it broke the service. And without being able to get into the eduroam Federation Manager and make the sort of a commensurate or a matching change on the Federation Manager, the service went down essentially, and it took a little bit of time for them to figure out what was going on, and then to try and log in to the legacy interface, and then realize that wasn't working, get a hold of us, and then have us help them provision an account. And really, it was it added hours and in a couple of cases a day or two to an issue that really could have been resolved within a handful of minutes.
All right, it looks like we have a question in from Stefan. Is that, am I pronouncing your name correctly? All right, so the question is, how are the logs internally within your regional networks handled? Within UETN, or do they stream those up to Internet 2 infrastructure? So at the school districts, and I guess it depends on what types of logs. The radius logs are going to be handled at the IDP side, the school district or the service center. And service centers, we describe those as maybe encompassing quite a few school districts. So they handle those internally. And then of course there are the logs that we do see in the Federation Manager, but it's not something, we're not able to see like usernames, and we're not able to see those kinds of details, that level of detail through the Federation Manager logs. So I think it depends on what types of logs, and I'm not sure if that fully answers the question, but
yeah, I can say,
yeah, go ahead, Brett. Sorry.
I was just going to add into what Amanda kind of described. Within Nebraska, we did have a number of discussions around whether or not there would be value for our regional network provider to stand up infrastructure to consolidate logs. I think in the end, we have so many constituents that all have their own existing log infrastructure or a need to aggregate logs from all of their infrastructure that adding another one on top of it may not have provided any value, but certainly having access to logs has been important. So as Amanda kind of alluded to, whether if you're responsible for the Radius server, you have the access to those logs, but you may be missing some of that routing if someone travels and they go to another site, and then that goes up to the top level Radius server for eduroam. You may be missing a piece of those logs there. And so having the log infrastructure, of at least being able to see the logs that are handled by the top level Radius servers has been very helpful. But no, we don't stream any of our constituent logs up to internet 2. The log viewer there is purely for viewing the top level Radius servers and whatever routing for authentication happens inside there. I'll say it has been very helpful. We discovered a couple of authentication loops within some configuration. And so just having access to that has been very helpful. You know, we wouldn't be able to see some of those within just our own IDP logs. But when we combine both of them, or by looking at the logs that we have and then going to the Federation Manager and opening up the log viewer there to see what happened, that's where we've been able to get the full picture. I don't know if that helps, but we did have a number of conversations around the log aggregation within our constituents, but haven't decided to move forward on anything just yet there.
Yeah, and I think a nice segue from this is sort of the level of support that UETN has chosen to offer as well. So we do kind of act as like maybe a go-between, to where if a school district, maybe a person or group of people report to us and they say, hey, I have issues. Me and my students have issues, or whoever, their staff, have issues logging in at a certain district or site. Can you please reach out to them, or maybe figure out what might be happening? We don't see anything on our end that might be a problem. So that's where I might come in and say, you know, let's get these guys talking and looking through those logs, you know, in a separate way. But I don't have the ability to look through those, and we actually don't support them technically, but we will facilitate any kind of conversation around that. So.
Stefan had another question around the sort of the rough ratio of what we're seeing in terms of Radius vendors. Is anyone using NPS or ICE or ClearPass, and you know, sort of what they represent, or which segments represent, I guess. You know, I think, yes, we do see NPS. You know, we do see ICE, ClearPass as well. I think ClearPass is generally not as common in the K-12 space, but you know, Jeff, Amanda, Brett, Ben can, you know, feel free to check me if I'm wrong there. I will say all things Microsoft are pretty popular, and we're seeing more and more instances of sort of Google IDs as well. Although I think at this point, it's sort of ICE and NPS are most popular around the K-12 space. But again, yeah, Amanda, Brett, Ben.
Sure. Yeah, I don't have. Yeah, I don't have percentages or numbers, but it is across the board. All to those above. So we do see ClearPass, we do see Cisco ICE, and then there's the other one, NPS. And I feel like there was one other vendor, maybe Ruckus based, I want to say. But in all, I think that it's basically whichever has the best documentation, and sometimes it's whatever currently in use for that district. So
we do track that. I don't have it for every school. I would say it's a good 40% MPS, about another 40% free Radius, and then we have some CloudPath. I think that's in there.
That's, yeah, Ruckus's solution. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mind you, I don't have all, but.
Well, and Ben, we've tried to collect that information because we often will have people that have the same Radius infrastructure and need to have a peer. So we're doing the same thing that Amanda does, where we're trying to play matchmaker and bring people together so they could talk about their configurations. But yes, I myself had to get on some calls and work with some NPS configuration. But it's been a lot of fun, especially learning how each of these Radius vendors, you know, just the variety of infrastructure you see when you have so many schools out there, so many school districts, and each one of different sizes. and how they've chosen to deploy this infrastructure. So yeah, it's a challenge, but it's something it is really great though when you can bring people together that have similar infrastructure.
Yeah, that's perfect. Yeah, that's exactly what we've done. One of the things that I know early on that we definitely stayed away from was making any recommendations because, you know, if a district already has people that are specializing in that particular radius type and they already have it going, we would never want to steer them away from that, especially if they already have those resources. So it became pretty clear where we kind of stood as far as support and you know, assistance on those. So
And Stefan, I just want to also circle back to your first question. I think it's worth noting too that the sort of the architecture, the overall architecture from a radius standpoint in the US is very, very flat. There are 2 top level servers and everybody points at those. So there is an intermediate radius level between Internet 2 and or in common and the eduroam community as a whole. And as Brett mentioned, you know, we've looked at possibly, you know, Brett mentioned it from the standpoint of logs, but you know, another thing that we're, you know, cognizant of is might it someday be necessary to have kind of regional radius proxies. Right now, the answer is no. You know, it doesn't. The complexity of putting that in would kind of outweigh any benefits. So for now, everybody goes straight to the top.
Yeah, one piece, Mike, where we are having active conversations around a radius concentrator for one particular service provider is in a commercial ISP. So we've had interest from a commercial ISP that is actually a fiber to the home internet service provider and deploying eduroam support within their routers that are deployed inside of just any residence inside that's a subscriber for that. And there's a number of discussions that are happening there. But I think that's one use case where the internet service provider would build out a radius concentrator that all of those residential subscribers and any eduroam traffic through those would go to that concentrated radius server before it then gets sent on to the top level radius servers. So, I mean, we are having some discussions around architectures like that for specific use cases, such as the individual internet service providers subscribers. And even, you know, further down the road, if we get to the point where we have these regional networks that are really significantly sized and we see the need for that, there may be some need for that. But right now, I think those are the only 2 spaces where we're even kind of in discussions around radius concentrators.
I just wanted to add, I'm active on the eduroam, the global Slack channel. So if anybody wants to reach out to me, ask questions or anything like that, you can contact me through there if you're on there. And also if you have any interest or you want to know more details about the eduroam to go project, I can also, you know, get you added to our Slack channel that we have set up for that. And you can kind of read through the details on it. It's a lot of fun. So.
Okay, any closing thoughts from you, Mike, or other presenters before I close this out here for the afternoon?
I'll just say again, thank you very much to our presenters. Really appreciate all the work that you've done here and especially all the work that you've done in the community for eduroam as a whole. And thanks to everyone who attended. We definitely appreciate you taking time out of your day and listening and you know, engaging in discussion. So thanks very much and stay tuned, more to come.
Excellent. And before we go, I'm just going to share my screen briefly with you all. Excuse me. To give just a few last housekeeping items. We again, echoing that thanks. We really do value your feedback. So if you would complete the survey that's going to pop up at the end of the webinar, we would really appreciate it. We take that feedback seriously. You can also contact me, April Motley, directly to provide feedback. There's my email address. We hope that you'll join us for our next I Am Online, which will be October 19th at 1 p.m. And if you have ideas, we do have a submission form live on the InCommon website at this time. If you have ideas for future webinars for I Am Online. With that, I will echo my thanks for everybody who participated today and everybody who attended. And also thanks to our Internet 2 events team, especially Carly and Susan, who help us make it possible for us to do this every month. You all have a great rest of the day. Thanks so much.
Bye, folks. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Thank you.